All right, welcome to another Stopping Socialism video. Donald Kendall here with Justin Haskins. Justin, I want to talk to you about this Washington Examiner article that I just recently saw that is titled Economics Degree Holder AOC Confuses Milton Friedman and John Maynard Keynes. So, yes, exactly. Representative Ocasio-Cortez went on an extended discussion about economics and John Maynard Keynes, where she referred to him as Milton Keynes. The New York Democrats said that the famed economist Milton Keynes predicted that by 2030, GDP and technology would have advanced so much that it would allow everyday people to work as little as 15 hours a week to provide for their families. So, Justin, I mean, I get slips of the tongue, but I mean, come on. This is like confusing O.J. Simpson with OJ and breakfast. You don't get more egregious than this. This is terrible.
This is pretty bad. My favorite part is her reaction after the fact. She writes, typo. It's John Maynard Keynes. Mixed his name with Milton Friedman, a very different economist. Well, that's true, but it's not a typo. Because for it to be a typo, you would have had to written it. She didn't write it. She said this in a video. So I don't know how she got that wrong too. That's another typo. She ironically made a typo about the typo, which was not in fact a typo, but her misspeaking. This is getting completely ridiculous. I don't know how anybody takes her seriously at all. And remember, she loves to lord over everybody that she's got a degree in economics.
Yeah.
So I guess she skipped the lecture where they talked about the differences between Milton Friedman and John Maynard Keynes, who, by the way, couldn't be any more different in terms of their economics. It's like totally different people. But yeah, I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah, both of those people are just rolling in their graves about this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Neither one of them would want to be associated with the other, I'm sure. I think the really interesting thing that's kind of lost in this a little bit, you mentioned it when you were doing the lead up to this conversation. You talked about the whole purpose of her video here was to explain that nationally we've had all this wealth increase nationally, GDP growth and over a long period of time. But she's saying that that hasn't really filtered down to other people in society, that they're not benefiting from the national wealth that has been increasing. And then the other thing that she says here is that that Milton Keynes, who's not a real person, but John Maynard Keynes, I guess, predicted that at some point in the future, we would have this world where efficiency would become so good, we would get so good at producing things that essentially people would only have to work 15 hours a week because productivity would be so high that we wouldn't need to work for our basic goods and services to the same degree that we've worked in the past. And she says, yeah, that's basically true. But the implication that she's making is that all these rich, greedy capitalists, they're hoarding all the wealth at the top and it's not filtering down to regular folks. That's the argument she's making. Now, this is there's really two important points to make about this, I think. The first is that this whole concept of we're going to move and transition to this world where there's not going to be any need for people to work or not work very much is a very Marxist idea. This is Karl Marx loved this idea. He believed that technology was going to increase dramatically. He was seeing this in his lifetime with factory workers being displaced by new forms of technology within factories, and that eventually you were going to have this world where we wouldn't need to have people working anymore. Most of our work could be produced by these collectively owned factories. This was one of the ideas that he had. It's a very core Marxist idea. What he failed to realize and what AOC fails to realize is that when people don't need to work in factories to produce televisions or whatever because there's machines doing it or there's cheaper labor overseas or whatever, they don't just sit at home and then just do nothing and then wait for the government to provide them with a check. I mean, some people do that, but that's not what most people do. The market adjusts and people find new jobs and new markets and new developments that occur. And so because our basic needs are being met in a very efficient way, we're able to provide goods and services to people that are not necessities in life, but are really nice things to have. And that's something that Marx didn't understand. That's something that AOC clearly doesn't understand here. And the other thing is that she says the wealth isn't filtering down to people in other parts of society. Now, in one sense, that's true. If you're just talking about dollars and cents, yeah, the sort of concentration of wealth in terms of the amount of money that people have is definitely higher at the upper end of it. There's a small group of people that control a lot of wealth. There's no question about that. But to say that people are not benefiting from that is completely not true. Our current system has made the world a healthier, wealthier, happier place than it has ever been in the history of human civilization. People are living longer. People have access to consumer goods that they never had access to before. It's easier now to get a college education and to own a home and to buy a car and to have a big screen TV in your house than it ever was before.
Yeah, there was a thing that we talked about on the podcast before, the In the Take podcast, where we talked about a human progress report. That's a project of the Cato Institute. And it studied labor and how much labor per hour it would take to get like a basic basket of goods, right? So they put down this thing. This is just baseline, right? So they found that a basket of this commodities that they put together that would have cost 47 hours of your labor in 1919, fast forward to 2019, would only cost 10 hours of your labor. So if you're just talking about like a base load, I could see that wealth kind of trickling down type of thing. This idea that like we're poorer than we ever were, that seems to be what she's kind of connotating here, I think is totally unfounded. Yeah. And this all comes on the heels of what she was like in front of Congress or something talking about how like the misnomer of being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which she thought was the most clever thing in the world to suggest that that's physically impossible. Yeah, we know that's physically impossible. You can't fly. But like what she was suggesting was that like you can't grow. There's no vertical mobility in the country, which it just runs so counter to the American dream that I find it offensive.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it all stems from this false idea that they have on the left that wealth equals how much money you have relative to how much money other people have. Sure. And in reality, that's not really how wealth, that's one way of looking at wealth, but that's not really a meaningful sense of how wealthy a society is, because you can have a society, say 100 years ago, where maybe the wealth was more spread out in society in terms of the actual amount of dollars and cents and property and stuff. Maybe it was better spread out. I'm not even necessarily saying it was. In some sense it was, I'm sure. But people lived much worse lives back then. Life is better now than it was back then. And in fact, the lower income people in this country, generally speaking, live much, 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 much better than middle class people or even wealthy people in many other countries around the world.
Sure.
So the idea that those people are not wealthy because they don't control lots of money is a really short-sighted way of looking at what wealth actually means. My regular life right now, I'm not a wealthy person by the left standards, but my life right now is better than the lives lived by kings for thousands of years. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. That's an actual fact. The fact that we're communicating in this way right now over the internet, I mean, is the most incredible thing that has ever existed really in the history of human civilization, right? And this is something that wasn't even within the realm of people's imaginations just 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And so we're able to live lives right now. I can go to the grocery store right now and buy any food product I want practically from anywhere around the world. I can turn on my television and see things happening in real time all over the world. I've got a big screen television in my house. I am not scared about dying from Spanish flu or something like that. I mean, my life is so much better now than the wealthiest people in society 100 years ago. So I am definitely wealthier in that sense, without question.
And that's not to say that, there's no progress to be made and that we should be content with our current situation, because of course we can strive to make life better. However, turning towards socialism and central control and government mandates and all that is only going to lead us in the opposite direction. And that is why Justin and I have really dedicated ourselves to the Stopping Socialism cause, the Stopping Socialism project here, So we encourage you, if you are also enthusiastic about getting involved in this project, to at least subscribe to us on our YouTube page, Stopping Socialism. Find us on Facebook, subscribe to that. There's a lot of stuff that we share daily on that, so you get some good stuff on that. And then just basically follow us on any social media that we've got going on. I know we're going to be starting at Twitter and Instagram soon, whichever ones that you're more interested in. And of course, going to stoppingsocialism.com. Justin, anything you want to add on top of that before we sign off for today?
No, just that I think that that you do a fantastic job hosting these videos, Donald. And I appreciate you. How about that?
I do my best. All right. Thank you all. That's it for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.